All right, let's get right into it. In the entire world of financial independence, pretty much the whole debate boils down to just two numbers, 25x and 33x. One promises you a super fast escape from the 9 to 5, while the other offers this ironclad guarantee. But here's the thing. The choice you make between them could literally be the difference between living the dream and a total financial nightmare. Just picture this for a second. You do everything right. You save like crazy, you invest, you hit your magic number, and you retire at 40 feeling like an absolute genius. But then, fast forward to age 75. You're too old to jump back into the workforce, your skills are dated, and you look at your account, and it's empty. That's the nightmare scenario, and believe me, it is a much more realistic risk than most people want to admit.
So that really brings us to the core question here. Is that magic number that millions of people are chasing, is it actually a trap? Could the most common piece of financial advice out there actually be setting you up to fail? Well, let's dig in and find out.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about the most popular kid on the block, the 25x rule. It's simple, it's clean, and honestly, it's so seductive because it just feels so achievable. This is the number that basically launched the entire FIRE movement.
Now, it's all based on this one core idea, the 4% rule. This actually came from a really famous study, the Trinity study. And the theory goes like this. You can pull out 4% of whatever your portfolio was worth on day one of retirement, give yourself a little raise for inflation each year, and have a really, really high chance of not running out of money for at least 30 years. So the math to figure out your number is ridiculously simple. You just take your total annual spending, everything you spend in a year, and you multiply it by 25. That's it. That's your freedom number. It's just the flip side of the 4% rule, and it's just so beautifully straightforward. So let's make this real. Let's say you spend about $50,000 a year to live your life. Okay, so you multiply that by 25, and your target, your nest egg, is $1.25 million. You hit that number, you pop the champagne, and you are free. Or are you?
And this is where we really have to zoom in and look a lot closer. Because, as appealing as the 25x rule is, it's got some pretty serious cracks in its foundation, especially for anyone who's dreaming of retiring early.
So the first big crack is something that's often kind of buried in the fine print. The 4% rule was designed for a standard 30-year retirement. And look, that makes sense if you retire at 65, right? A 30-year plan gets you to 95. The math holds up. But if you're trying to punch out at 40, you don't need your money to last 30 years. You might need it to last 50, maybe even 60 years. And over that much longer timeline, the failure rate of the 25x rule starts to climb and climb pretty significantly. But honestly, the single biggest danger, the real monster under the bed, is something called sequence of returns risk. This is basically the financial version of getting punched in the face the second you walk out the door into retirement. It's not about your average returns over decades. It's about the specific returns you get in those first few critical years. They have this huge, outsized impact on everything.
All right, so let's watch this play out. Here you are, freshly retired. You did it. You followed the 25x rule perfectly. You've got your $1.25 million portfolio, and you're all set to start withdrawing your $50,000 a year.
But then, bam, your very first year of freedom, the market absolutely tanks. A 20% drop, just like we saw back in 2022. This is that punch in the face we were talking about. Your timing was just unlucky. And the effect is just devastating. Your portfolio plummets from $1.25 million down to just $1 million. But hey, you still gotta live, so you pull out your $50,000, and now you're down to $950,000. You've just eaten into your core principal, and even if the market comes roaring back, you're trying to climb out of a hole that's just way too deep. This, right here, is how retirements fail. So, if 25x is a total gamble on market timing, what's the alternative? Well, this brings us to the much more conservative, much safer option, the 33x safety net. This is the choice for people who truly crave peace of mind.
The math here is also pretty simple. Instead of a 4% withdrawal rate, you drop it down to a much safer 3%. And the inverse of 3% is 33.3. So the new formula is just your annual spending times 33. It seems like a small change, but that 1% difference in your withdrawal rate makes a massive difference in your portfolio's survival.
But, and this is the big but, safety has a price. For that same person spending 50 grand a year, the 33x rule means they need a nest egg of $1.65 million. That is a $400,000 difference. For a high earner saving 40K a year, that's literally 10 more years of work. 10 more years of commutes, of office drama, of missed time with family. This is the central conflict, right here.
So why on earth would anyone work an extra decade? Because a 33x portfolio is a tank. It is built to absorb that punch from a bad market. If you start with $1.65 million and the market drops 20%, you're still left with $1.3 million after you take your money out. You're still above that critical 25x survival line. You essentially bought yourself an insurance policy against bad luck.
There is a dark side to chasing this level of safety, though. It's a psychological trap called one more year syndrome. People will hit their 25x number, but then they get scared. They push the goalpost to 27x, then 30x, then 33x. As one writer put it, they become dragons hoarding gold, terrified to actually leave the cave. You risk wasting your healthiest, most vibrant years chasing a level of security you might not even need. This all feels like a pretty impossible choice, doesn't it? Risk financial ruin or risk a life of regret? Well, the solution here is to realize this is a false choice. We've got to move beyond this black and white binary thinking. The key, the real mental shift, is to reframe the entire problem. The old way of thinking saw retirement as this hard stop, like an on-off light switch. The new, much smarter model is to think of it like a dimmer switch. You don't have to go from 100% work to 0% work overnight. And this brings us to this brilliant hybrid strategy called the dynamic guardrail approach. Here's how it works. Step 1, you grind it out. You hit your 25x number, and you use that as your escape hatch to quit the high-stress job you can't stand. But instead of fully retiring, you move to step 2, you coast. You find some fun part-time work, maybe a passion project that earns just enough to cover some of your bills, and that leads to the magic of step 3. With less pressure on your portfolio, it can keep growing from that 25x number all the way up to that fortress level 33x, while you're already free.
You know, at the end of the day, there is no single magic number that's right for everyone. The real answer depends completely on your spending, your personal flexibility, and frankly, your personality.
Your spending flexibility is your greatest superpower in all of this. Seriously. If a huge chunk of your budget is discretionary, things like travel, fancy dinners, hobbies, then the 25x rule is way safer for you. Why? Because if the market tanks, you can just dial back the fun stuff for a year or two. No real pain. But if your budget is mostly rigid, fixed costs like a mortgage and insurance, you have zero wiggle room. You need that bigger 33x cushion. And finally, it really just comes down to your own psychology. Are you an optimist, an optimizer who trusts that you can adapt, maybe earn a little extra cash or cut back if things go south? If that's you, 25x is probably totally fine. Or are you more of a pessimist, someone who needs that rock-solid certainty to sleep at night? For you, those extra years of work to get to 33x aren't a waste at all. They are the price you willingly pay for peace of mind. So really, the point of all this isn't to just blindly follow some rule. It's about deeply understanding the trade-offs. You're balancing risk against time, security against freedom. The real goal isn't just a number. It's about building a life that feels both free and secure. So that brings us to the final question I want you to think about. After seeing all the math and the risks, where do you land? Are you on Team 25x or are you on Team 33x?